Thank you so much for inviting me today. I very much appreciate it. I've had a chance to speak to Republican women federated groups up and down the state, and this is the Army. This is the Army that will actually go out and get the votes done to make Republican candidates like myself, Nathan Hoffman, running for Attorney General, win this race. So let me tell you the good news. It's always good to start off a meeting like this with some good news. I believe, and I'll be able to convince you in the next 6.5 minutes, that this Republican, for the first time in a generation, will win the position of California Attorney General. Why? Safety and security. Safety and security is the crossover issue in the 2022 election. It's not just Republicans that have had a wake-up call, that are fed up, frustrated, and afraid to send their children out at night, afraid to send their parents out at night, afraid to send their neighbors out at night. That cuts across to Republicans, Democrats, and independents. And how do I know that? There was a poll that came out. 78% for the first time in 20 years use safety, security, and homelessness as a top 3 issue. When that happens, when we've gone from 2014, one of our safest years in the last 50 years, to 2022, one of our most dangerous, it is a universal wake-up call for all Californians, including the Democrats and independents, to vote for a Republican. Why a Republican? Because Republicans were traditionally associated with safety and security. In the 1970s, 80s, 90s, we were the California Attorney Generals, Republicans, because we ran on safety and security. Then we got away from that message. Now we're back at the exact time when safety and security is in the foremost issue of voters' minds. So how will this Republican, Nathan Hoffman, win and take advantage of this rare opportunity in a generation? You need 3 things to win. You need qualifications, you need endorsements, you need fundraising. Let me start with my qualifications. Lifelong Californian, actually married a woman who grew up in Camarillo, which I don't get to say too often because a lot of people don't know where Camarillo is, but this group does. And if she was here, she would be smiling. And I'll let her know I said it. So lifelong Californian, went to Brown University, Stanford Law School, came back to Los Angeles, clerked for a federal judge, went right to the U.S. Attorney's Office. And as a federal prosecutor, I prosecuted narcotics traffickers, gang members, international money launderers. I ran the environmental crime section and went after air, sea, and land polluters. I even spearheaded the LA Disaster Fraud Task Force, which we got, if you remember the 90s, it was the floods, the fires, the earthquakes, and the riots. We got $2 billion. They put me in charge of a task force, and in 6 months, we brought in 70 prosecutions and $25 million. 10 years later, President George W. Bush called me up one day and said, would you like to be the Assistant Attorney General in charge of the U.S. Department of Justice's Tax Division? I said either thank you, sir, or thank you, Mr. President. It's very vague. Off I went to Washington, D.C. I have a very understanding wife of 29 years, 3 little kids, and they were very supportive of me because I was running a $100 million division that had 350 lawyers going after tax cheats across the nation. Came back to Los Angeles, was the head of 2 major international law firms, white-collar divisions, and along the way was the president of the LA City Ethics Commission. Why do I tell you these qualifications? Because these qualifications are what you need to be the California Attorney General, the Chief Law Enforcement Officer on day 1. Because as the Chief Law Enforcement Officer, someone with a prosecutorial background, a U.S. Assistant Attorney General, and even a defense lawyer, I can come into any jurisdiction like LA. And if George Gascon is not doing his job, I can literally have my 4,000 lawyers take over for George Gascon. Yeah. So folks, if you believe in recalling George Gascon, that's half the mission. You have to get rid of the current far-left Attorney General, Rob Bonta, who has enacted the most far-left agenda, is in complete allegiance with George Gascon. You need to get rid of him and George Gascon if you want to bring safety and security back to your community. So that's one part, qualifications. Endorsements. I have the endorsement of the California Republican Party. I have the endorsements of Kevin McCarthy. I have the endorsements of former Governor Pete Wilson, Congress members Darrell Issa, Michelle Steele, Young Kim, Doug LaMalfa, Jay Obernolte, Ken Calvert. I have the endorsement of legislators, the head of the state Senate for Republicans, Scott Wilk, the head of the state Assembly, James Gallagher, and 10 other state legislators. But I'm not just endorsed by Republicans. I've got Steve Cooley, former LA DA's Republicans endorsement, but Jackie Lacey too. Jackie Lacey, a Democrat, is endorsing this Republican. I have Orange County Sheriff Don Barnes, Republican, but I also have LA Sheriff Alex Villanueva, Democrat. I am the only Republican that he, on a statewide basis, that he is endorsing. So I have the bipartisan endorsements. I have the qualifications. Now what about the fundraising? Because when I started almost a year ago, April 22nd, the day that Rob Bonta, the far left appointed Gavin Newsom guy, got in charge, I said, I'm going to declare the same day. My political guys say, are you kidding? Because you have until June 30th to make a report on how much money you raised. I said, how much money do I need to raise? They said $250,000 in 2 months. Can you do it? I said, if I can't do that, then folks, I shouldn't run for the office. I raised $750,000. We just went over $2 million, and that's how I'm going to win this race. We have 15 million pieces of mail. We have 12 million Facebook and Instagram impressions. We've been up on radio, conservative radio, for almost a month. We're now going on TV as well. That's how I'll win the race. So when I say I'm a candidate, a Republican candidate who can win this race, take advantage of our crossover issue with crossover endorsements and crossover fundraising, because 40% of my money has come from Democrats and independents. That's a shocking statistic, but I don't give them a different speech. I talk about safety and security, partnering with the police, not defunding but funding the police, and making sure that crimes have consequences. That speech is resonating with Democrats and independents, it's resonating with Republicans, and I hope it'll resonate with you. Again, we're raising additional monies to go out and get our message out there, and I so appreciate the chance to speak with you today, because this Republican, Nathan Hoffman, will win on June 7th in this primary, and please make sure you vote and get your friends to vote, and then in November 8th, when we defeat the Democrat for the first time in a generation.
Yes.
Thank you very much.